Hello. Another Friday. It's us again. Three gentlemen just having a drink, trying to solve the world's problems, talking about things that we know nothing about. Once again, I'm obliged to tell you that if you take us seriously, you ought to have your head examined. We're just chatting and trying to solve the world's problems. Gentlemen, we're at the end of another week, albeit a very cold one. How's your week been? What's up with the scarf? Can we call you Scarf Mo?
Do you have presidential ambitions?
Well, I was inspired, so I just thought maybe I get my own scarf.
Yeah, we're going to do something about your colors and this pajama thing. Last week somebody commented on the color of your socks, and I see you've doubled down.
Well, I thought I'd make them brighter. I thought that was the point, right?
Okay. Anyway, what are you drinking?
I'm having Bumba coffee, and again from the Eastern Islands as well. And it's beautiful. The aroma is just great.
Also, I did a
so
decent
that will
job.
keep me awake.
Bring it for you.
Sorry?
You made it first?
Yeah.
Wow, does he look like he can operate a coffee machine?
Does he look like he knows how to do anything? Practical.
So, was it to your liking, sir?
Yes, it's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, fantastic.
And as for us, I was supposed to bring the whiskey this week. I was supposed to bring a Glenmorangie 10. But with my head in the clouds, I forgot to bring it. So I popped into a bottle store and got a bottle of Paul John. In the spirit of last week, where we explored some new world whiskies, we had something from Japan. This week, I thought we'd try something from India. I knew nothing about it until this morning, but I know Rufaro's done a bit of research.
Yes, I'm a bit of a whiskey nerd. So Paul John is made from a distillery in Goa, in India, which is south of Mumbai. It used to be a Portuguese colony. It's actually quite young. It was launched in 2012 in London. It's quite peaty, it reminds me of other peaty whiskies like Johnny Walker Double Black and Laphroaig. And to be quite honest, after the amazing experience last week with the Hibiki, I had low expectations for this week, but this is actually quite good.
Yeah, and Rufaro's having it on the rocks, I'm having it neat.
Because I'm either not brave or not stupid. I'm adulterating it with ice and water.
Or you just don't appreciate the finer things in life.
Well, this is almost cask strength. It's 46%, so let's hope that you manage to stay lucid throughout our discussion.
Stay with us and see how that goes. A lot of things have happened this week. One of the interesting things that has happened is the Consumer Council issued some inflation numbers. They reckon inflation for the month of May was 13% or thereabouts, which when you annualize gives you a rate over 300%. The Zimstat, the official government agency, gives us a rate around 2.5% for the month of May. World of difference. I mean, before we go into the causes of the differences, what's our personal experiences? When you walk into the store, I mean, my wife does the shopping. The only thing I really know the price of is Castle Light, and it's still $109.99. But what's everybody else's experience?
Well, it's interesting because our first show, you guys were quite emphatic that inflation had not risen because of Castle Light.
And it still hasn't.
And I did highlight that the Consumer Council and ZCTU and civil servants and a lot of ordinary folk in this country think otherwise. And I think that's why we're seeing these numbers, that for a family of 6, it now costs $40,000 Zim dollars for their upkeep. And what's interesting is a civil servant salary is half of that.
So husband and wife put together, everything's fine.
Well, not quite, right? Because a lot of our households, you have only one breadwinner, so it becomes quite impossible to survive.
So you're with the Consumer Council number?
Well, as an economist, And if I put my economist hat, I'm not with anyone. I'm with the truth. So I think what we need to interrogate is the Consumer Council telling the truth, or Zimstat telling the truth, or our lived experience? What is that telling us?
But is it about the truth, or it's just about different institutions using different methods to come up with a view on inflation?
Look, where I come from, inflation is very simple. It's debasement of currency. And once you have debasement of currency, what it means is by how much is your money losing value. Now, the Consumer Council is telling us it's losing value by 13% every single month. And Zimstats is telling us that it's losing 2%.
Well, not every single month. For May.
For May.
Let's be clear.
Yeah, thanks for that. For May. And the question we must ask ourselves is by how much? And we should look at the central bank. But unfortunately, the central bank, the last numbers that they have for us in terms of money supply is of February. So we don't know what it is. So what will be interesting is maybe Rufaro can look at the Consumer Council basket and what you think is happening there.
Okay, so I don't know how they put their numbers together, but somebody did mention something quite interesting to me during the week, that if you look at May in particular, right, the rate devalued from about 120 to 130, 135.
Which rate is this?
The power market rate. And
I don't doubt that. I don't know what these guys are talking about.
So, and that seems to corroborate the numbers put together by the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe.
So you're suggesting the whole basket moved in sync with the para market rate?
So is it a coincidence? I don't know. But I think that possibly based on how the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe puts their numbers together, if they get a lot of their data from the informal sector, which is very sensitive to what's happening on the power market, then basically, which is where most Zimbabweans do their shopping, right? Then it means that it lends some credibility, or rather additional credibility to the number that we're getting from the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe.
What does our audience think?
Well, I don't know. Maybe
Interesting.
Maybe some of you guys could drop some comments in the comment section just below the video you're watching. But Rufaro, coming back to you, are you therefore suggesting that we're still a dollarized economy? I mean, again, you said it moved from 120 to about 135, which gives you, I guess, around a 14-15% move, which is very much in sync with the 13%. So you're saying SI 127, no SI 127, whatever, we have these prices on the shelf in ZWL purely for presentation purposes, but the reality is we're dealing in dollars.
Well, look, I think we have a dual economy. So we have a formal sector of big corporates that transact in Zim dollars for the most part, and we have an informal sector that transacts in US dollars for the most part. So if you're looking at numbers in the informal sector and you translate them into Zim dollars, you're going to translate them at a power market rate, because those players in the economy only trade Zim dollars at the power market rate. Whereas the players in the formal sector, to the extent that they might be importers or exporters, when they translate, they use the auction rate, they use the official rate. So the pricing regimes are different. And
But last week we talked about Delta, and we said we're still waiting for BAT. But we're actually seeing one of the largest corporates in this country said they don't use 85 anymore. So do we actually still have these two?
Yeah, look, I think Delta is, they're pragmatic. And they were also in a place where they had seen a significant fall in the US dollar receipts because of the initial incarnation of SI 127. So I suspect that in their next trading update, they might have a different opinion now that they're getting currency, now that they're still able to price in US dollars, and they're not locked in at
But I
85.
disagree
With what? And why?
with most of what Rivara has said.
Okay.
We need to contextualize. The auction is...
Who said
15
auction?
Well, the 85 rate, right?
Okay.
That's where the auction rate comes from. It's only 15% of our transactions, right? So it's insignificant. It's just that you have a government that really believes in that rate and that is forcing everybody to use that particular rate. But when you get into the market...
But are they forcing us to use that rate? Because initially, the first incarnation of SI 127 said that you could not sell goods at US dollars at a discount or effective rate that was not 85. And then the clarification that came a few days after that...
Clarification, retraction.
Call it what you like. They then said, look, you can sell at whatever,
As long as the money is not coming from auction.
Okay, so let me explain it this way. If you're in business and you're getting currency from the auction and it's only 15% of your total input bill, should your price then be 15%? Or your prices should look at the basket of currencies or wherever you've gotten that currency from the para market, and some will be in US dollars, and auction.
But you guys are basically agreeing.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing. I don't think we're disagreeing. And I think...
I disagree that the point of reference when we talk about currency should be 85. And I think that's what Delta is trying to tell us. And I think that's what the market is trying to tell us. I think it's quite ironic that in 1 second you were talking about the Consumer Council and you were both calculating a rate and you say the rate moved by 15%. What are you using? You're using a market rate. Why did you not use the auction rate? Why did you not say, well, I think the Consumer Council is talking rubbish, the rate has not moved, the rate has been 85, what are they talking about?
Well, it's a rate, we're referring to it.
No, I think we live in a multi-rate regime. So if you are importing grain, if you are importing essential medicine, if you're importing certain things that the government believes are a priority, then you can go to the auction and you will likely get currency allocated to you at 85, 86. And that's your effective rate because that's...
But Rufaro, do you know anyone who relies solely on the auction to fund their imports?
Okay, so let's keep this. This was just supposed to be a tour through the news, right? So, okay, so the first thing that we talked about is this inflation rate, alternative measure of inflation that's come from the CCZ. It looks like they reckon it's a lot higher.
Yeah, 13% versus 2.5, huge difference.
Now, let's drill down. Government has this 2% number. But interestingly, in the past week, the government's own auditor has come out and said their numbers, not sure about it. Some of us are familiar with the Auditor General's report that came out earlier in the week that had a lot of issues. Have you had a chance to look at it?
Oh yeah, I've looked at it. Perhaps you can explain to our audience, because as we unpack it, we're going to be using accounting jargon, qualified reports, unqualified.
I am not an accountant.
Well,
okay. All right. I know what you want me to say.
So anyway, okay. Let me unpack it, and then perhaps you can explain a bunch of things to our audience. So one of the things that struck me as I went through this report is that the Auditor General looked at a lot of accounts from a lot of different...
First, who is the Auditor General?
So the Auditor General is a creature of the constitution of the country, but the personality is appointed by the government.
Okay.
And their job basically is to audit the accounts of government institutions. So they do this work, and they are bound by the statute to issue a report. And so the report that we're talking about is actually for numbers...
2019.
They did indicate that they had various challenges on the back of COVID, which caused delays in their reporting. But still, I think the report is interesting.
And what are the major issues? So why is this important? Why are we even linking it to the accuracy of government numbers?
Well, because they speak to the credibility of those numbers, right? So what an auditor basically expresses an opinion of, so what you do is, or the way it works is, you give an auditor a set of accounts, and then the auditor does some work on them and then forms an opinion. And basically what they're saying is, people should rely on these numbers, or they should just basically treat them as rubbish.
Your words, not mine.
So yeah, okay, perhaps I was a bit dramatic there, but fundamentally that's what an auditor is basically saying, is giving you is rating the numbers on a scale of reliability.
So the current Auditor General is a lady called Mildred Chiri. She presents this report. I understand she says something like 42% of the audits she did across the government were unqualified.
No, I wish that was the case.
Oh, right.
Actually, 42% of the reports were qualified. And
that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, unfortunately in accounting jargon, qualified accounts means it's a bad thing.
Oh, right. So you want to be unqualified?
You want to be unqualified.
Okay. So what percentage of all our work was unqualified?
So 42% of the numbers were qualified. The other 42%, another 42% was unqualified, but with material issues. So basically, she's saying the numbers seem to speak to what happened, but there's some issues there.
Big issues.
Material is big in accounting jargon. Yeah. Okay.
So 42, 84, 16.
16% of the accounts she looked at were unqualified, and there were no issues.
So the guys who gave us this 2.5% number, are they in the 16 or okay? We'll leave that for another day. Okay. So what were her major issues?
Oh, there were lots of issues, but I think maybe Tinashe can come in and speak to some of the more interesting ones.
Okay, I think that was a very interesting chat there, and I think the audience will find that very useful.
Everybody wants to know what a qualified auditor is. I mean, they were wondering.
True. So thank you very much, Rivara, for that. I think the issues that speak to me is bureaucracy, because we need to make the distinction. When we talk about the state, that there is the policymaker and then there's the bureaucracy. And what she was auditing was the bureaucracy. And what we are finding is that the bureaucracy, the government bureaucracy, if we use the numbers, has somewhat failed. And
no, but let's go to our issues. So, wait, she's saying one in six government departments has accounts that she's happy with. The other 5 out of 6, she's not happy with them. What is she unhappy about? What should...
Systems failure. So I would, I've worked in a bureaucracy. So these are some of the issues that we would talk about, right? And there are 3 issues that you look at. You look at people, you look at processes, and you look at the product. Now, when you look at government, the product is very clear what they must do. It's very, very clear. So we cannot get into a discussion around what they must do. So they know exactly what they must do because they're given that from...
No, actually, you're being very general. Okay, I'll help you here, right? So she says, I read it, and I'm supposed to be asking the questions, but I'll answer my own question.
Well, the context
we're having drinks, so you can contribute as much as you like.
So she says, there's over-expenditure, unauthorized expenditure. She says...
And I'm telling you why.
But let's help these guys understand, first of all, what she said.
Okay.
What did she mean when she said she's only happy with 1 in 6 government departments? She says, in 5 out of 6 government
departments accounts. So
departments, parastatals, 1 in 6 places that she audited, is the place where she's happy. The other 5, she's not. She says they're spending money that they're not approved, they're not authorized to. She says their governance processes don't work. They don't have boards in place. They don't have audit committees. She says they're going over budget. She says their revenue records are incomplete, which means basically she went there and said, you guys said you made $100 last year. Let's see the invoice books or the receipt books. And they said one was eaten by the dog.
Well,
that kind of stuff. She says some of them, what they put in their report. So they said we collected $50 last year, and then when she actually went into the system, into the books of account, they had a completely different number.
Yeah. We bought a car. And
Yes, there's missing cars. There's
Missing
apparently
cars.
3 Prados that can't be accounted for in the
9
government. Like
cars.
entire
But-
Prados. Can you imagine how big a Prado is? It just can't be found.
400 million.
No, look, I think, guys,
Agriculture.
we can get lost in the weeds of the details. I think
So,
I
that's why the structure was very important.
I think what's clear is that the numbers, the national accounts, are a mess. I think if it's a 100+ page report. The executive summary is only 26 pages. If you read the executive summary, it's clear that the national accounts are a mess.
But I think it's beyond the accounting. It's saying the bureaucracy is unable to deliver. It does not have systems in place.
Unable.
Doesn't
Unable is a strong word.
has failed to deliver. Incapable of delivering.
Well, look, no.
Incapable is a synonym for unable.
But the point I'm trying
I
to
think
make
this is speculation.
No, it's not. Because it clearly states that you have a system. You're not even using the system.
I think what's clear. I think
management meetings happen ad hoc. I was trying to give you a framework that in a bureaucracy, what we work with usually in a bureaucracy is we work with a framework. So we get that report and we put it in a framework. And in our framework, what it's telling us, rather than getting into the nitty-gritties, is the framework is telling you that the government bureaucracy is not working. So this is also important for the government that is actually in power. Because what it means is, whatever the president says will never translate to and cascade right through the bureaucracy.
I beg to
Because
differ.
the system.
I beg to differ. I think you're conflating issues, right? I think that what
You, big words again.
I think what the you don't like the word conflate, do you?
I still don't know if you know what it means.
I think that what the Auditor General's report is telling us is that the numbers that were presented to her are unreliable and have issues. They don't actually speak to the operational efficiency of the state, right? So it's like, okay, think of it this way. You as an entrepreneur can be fantastic at manufacturing and delivering great products to your customers, but you can be absolutely awful at putting accounts together, right? The two are not. It doesn't follow that your accounts are a mess, that your operation is a mess.
Fair
your
enough.
operation can be phenomenal, and your accounting can be horrible.
Fair
right?
enough.
So what
But
the Auditor
tell
General's
that-
report is
tell
telling
that
us
to the
is
pothole
that
outside my house.
accounting is a mess.
You know,
That's what the Auditor General is telling us.
I think I highlighted the issue of product. And George was kind enough to really pick it up that it's service delivery, right? Would you say that service delivery is happening in Zimbabwe?
0% pass rate in grade 7 last year in a lot of schools around the country.
And I'm telling you that of course, remitters from an accounting perspective, but if you're strategic, when you read that report, what you need to keep in mind is it's telling you certain things about 3 things. About the product, which is service delivery, and where service delivery is, and what the consumers and the customers of government are experiencing. And the second thing is it's telling you about the process, right? Where ad hoc meetings, you don't have steering committees, you do not have...
They aren't computerized.
They're not
It's 2021
computerized.
and
So that
Dogs
speaks
eat the
into
receipt.
the process. That speaks into the process. And then the final thing is on people, right? Do you have the right people? And I'm telling you this, that once you have that framework and you go to the chief executive officer of government or the person that the consumers or us as Zimbabweans have given the remit to run our state, and I'm telling you that the problem, why he must take this quite seriously, is that whatever he says will never cascade right through because the bureaucracy has failed.
So
That's what this report is telling us.
Okay, so the bureaucracy is not doing what they're supposed to. But what does this tell us about the bureaucracy, right? And I think it tells us one of 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
Either they're negligent, they just don't care. Or they're incompetent. They care, but no matter how hard they try, they don't know what they're supposed to do or how to do it. Or thirdly, they're malicious. They actually want the systems to fail.
Could be all 3, but
I think it's immaterial. I don't care which one of the 3 it is. I only care about does it work, does it not work, and what do we need to do to make it work. The motivation behind certain actions or failures, why does it matter?
No, but it matters in how to fix it.
I can hazard a guess. There is a clear disparity between the policymakers and the bureaucracy. So I know I've been hard on the bureaucrats, and I'm going to
Have
be on
you?
the support. Yeah, I have, but I'm going to support them in one end. That the policymakers don't know when their job starts and ends. So if you have policymakers that then dabble in the bureaucracy, that's how you get ad hoc meetings. Then the bureaucracy is incapable of working as it should because you have policymakers that are spending a lot of time in the bureaucracy.
So you got a job, you're running this company, or this parastatal, and you go and you spend money, you go and you buy, I was going to say whiskey, you're probably not allowed to buy whiskey, you go and buy coffee for the office. And the auditor comes and says, you wrote here that you spent $7 on coffee, where's the receipt? And you can't account for that. How do you blame that on a policymaker?
Okay, so that's a good intervention there, George. And I just want you to be strategic and zoom out for a moment. Think about this. Every time there's a minister who is given a new remit of a particular ministry, what's the first thing they do? Is to change parastatal boards. That's the first thing that they do.
But my job is
But
still to get receipts.
you cannot run a bureaucracy where every time a minister comes in, he comes in with his own people.
But Tinashe, you send one of your domestic servants to the supermarket. They will bring a receipt back. And Mildred
I see the problem.
Mildred Chiri is saying
Accountants.
there were no receipts.
You're right, and I'm saying that is just a
But isn't that just
manifestation.
a skin in the game problem?
That's a manifestation. That is a manifestation. You cannot be changing state boards every time
You've got a job description.
But what's
You've
wrong
got
with that?
employed. You've got a job description that says you
they
must
come
account
up
for
with
these
their
things.
own ideas. So remember, if we have a 10-year plan, which the president has, right? If the president has a
But look, let me
right?
stop you there.
If we have a 2030
Tinashe's
plan,
book, yeah.
No.
the 2030 plan,
No,
right?
but Tinashe,
And every time a minister, every time a new person goes into a ministry, the first thing that they do is change.
no, but
But where's the receipt?
You've been a banker,
fine.
right? Wait. I want to challenge the point that he's making here because if you raise a bunch of money, right, as a banker, as a private equity player, right, and you go and become the controlling shareholder in George's company, are you going to say, well, I'm not going to shake things up and change the board and management, because that will be disruptive. I'm just going to try and work with these guys as best I can to get the outcomes that I want. Is that?
And when you've changed the board, are you going to accept that a guy went and bought a car, or there's a payment that went out for a car, and there's no car in the car park?
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I will look at my experience in the real world, right?
Oh, because we live in
Narnia.
The bureaucracy is supposed to work, whether you change the board or you don't. Because remember, the board is really around the strategy. So if the president of the nation has already defined the strategy, I don't see any reason why you need to change the board.
Oh my gosh,
That
are you
is-
serious?
no.
Because it does not come. Remember, the president is
No.
the CEO. Have you changed the CEO
No.
of the country?
Look,
No.
The CEO of the country
Tinashe-
has said,
Tinashe.
"This is my plan."
No.
You're offside.
Have you changed?
Let's move on.
The president of the nation.
Let's move on.
We are going
We
to
haven't.
No, we're gonna.
So why
very
does?
swiftly move on.
Okay.
But okay, interesting thing though. So apparently, ironically, we take this Chiri report very seriously, but in the corporate world, we don't take the auditor seriously. Isn't it ironic?
Well, it depends on which corporates you talk about. Look, and for the record, when I think about the way the universe of audit is structured, it's fundamentally flawed because what it says is that, so let's say you are an auditor, right?
I used to be.
Yeah. And I have a business that needs audited accounts. I'm going to approach you and I'm going to say, George, Yeah, I need an audit to impress Tinashe. And this kind of opinion would impress Tinashe, and these kinds of opinions would upset Tinashe. And this is important to me. That's why I'm going to pay for an audit report. Right? So, here's my bank account, so I have capacity. Do you want to be my auditor? Like,
I think
it's fundamentally flawed.
Governance has moved on.
So it's fundamentally flawed.
I'm regulated. I'm bound by law.
Guys, we're now on King 3. We've moved far from Enron.
In this country, we have a Public Accounting Orders
guys.
Act.
It doesn't
It's
matter.
regulated by law. I can go to jail.
Look, it's the incentives are just problematic. There's no skin in the game. So for as long as auditors are paid by the people who are the auditing, the idea of independence
So who should pay auditors?
it's mythical. Somebody else.
Who? The taxman, the taxpayer.
They have a fiduciary duty. They are liable. That's where we are in the real world. I'm quite surprised, Rufaro, you don't understand this. Auditors are now liable for what they say.
In some parts of the world, not everywhere.
Yeah, but more so now, right?
Okay.
More so now.
It's kind of like like Warren Buffett. If you think about the Berkshire Hathaway board, right, and his criteria for appointing non-executive directors, right? He's quite clear that when he thinks about potential candidates, he actually looks at long-standing shareholders, right? This idea of an independent, a guy who owns no stake, who's just going to be there to look out for the interests of people, some other stakeholders, for whom he or she may not actually have skin in the game with.
I think the point of independent directors stems from the fact that a lot of these big corporates have a lot of minority shareholders, very small shareholders, who are not in any way protected at board level. So the idea of bringing in an independent board member...
But does it make sense to bring in a guy who has never had a coffee or glass of whiskey or beer with any of these minorities, who doesn't know what their worldview is, what they care about? Because he's got these amazing credentials and qualifications.
The reason why they brought
this person must be...
The reason why they
can sit on the board and represent them.
The reason why they brought on is because of their character and ethical considerations.
And those transcend money, because these guys are going to get a check, they're going to get an expense account, their profile is going to increase.
Would you sit on a board for free?
Yeah, for fiduciary duty, yeah, I would. Not now, but in my old age, when I'm 75, 85. I think that's
and you think we should be appointing 85-year-olds to boards?
Well, I think so, because then they act in the best interest of their fiduciary considerations.
I think
it's problematic to put a 40-year-old on a board. I think I would disagree.
But if you own 10% of the company, if you own 15, 20% of the company, is it not a good idea to have you on that board fighting for your interests?
No, absolutely. But what tends to happen now with a lot of companies, right, is you have 60, 70% of the shareholding, which is disaggregated. You've got 1%, 0 point something, right? And you only have 3 major shareholders who have 10% and above. Mm-hmm. And the consideration, the governance...
But shouldn't you get one of those guys, with one of those many little guys to be on the board?
Is he
rather than a stranger?
Or she better off than...
That's why the system then says, you know what, we as a board, because remember this is also coming from the board members and the companies themselves, we're saying that, yes, indeed, we protect the major shareholders, but we have a lot of these disparate small shareholders who must also have a say. And we think that the best person to represent them is somebody who has a character that we agree to and has...
on paper.
Okay.
Well, that's why I say...
Gentlemen, I think maybe... Remember, we
75. So it's from 80. 88. So
well,
all right.
So from at least 85 and above.
Mganya,
we live up to your 100 now.
No, maybe we need to move on to something else in the news. We read, it wasn't in the mainstream news, but we read this week that diaspora remittances are something like 82% up on the same period last year, in a world that is being stricken by COVID and we're in a bit of turmoil. How does that make sense?
Okay. I think that if you look at the numbers for the last 20 years, we've seen that growing. So there's always been a trend of remittances.
But what's the new number? What's
520?
And which
520 million
annualized takes us
1.3 billion dollars.
This is
in the formal channel.
This is right there, right below platinum, right? This is like platinum, gold, diaspora.
No. Platinum,
Diaspora.
More than gold.
Yeah.
More than gold.
More than gold.
How does this make sense?
Well, I think the short-term effects are COVID related, right? There hasn't been as much traffic on our borders as previously. But the long-term trend.
Sorry, explain that.
Increasing.
Explain that.
Well, if you look at Byte Bridge, for example, there's a lot of traffic that usually goes through Byte Bridge has been severely affected by COVID. And what I mean is, if you and I are in Joburg, and I know that you're traveling to Harare, I'm more likely to give you some money to give my folks back home, right? That's not happening. The only way I can send money is through formal channels. So I think that a big chunk of it is just money that's going through the formal channels. But if you were to look at the global scale, I think the rise of remittances has been there, especially in the last 5 years. We've seen a lot more Zimbabweans moving, particularly to South Africa. And that's where a lot of our remittances are coming from.
So we should just forget exporting gold, export kids.
Well, it turns out.
Fundamentally, after platinum, our greatest export is humans.
So let's just export kids, eh?
I think so.
Well, kids know, adults. But look,
is this a good thing? Is it a good thing?
I think that's a great question. I think that's really a great question to say that what is driving growth in diaspora remittances and why are so many Zimbabweans leaving, right? And I don't think they're leaving because they think that Zim is a great place to stay, right? I think that they've worked hard, they've educated themselves, they just can't empower themselves economically here, right? It's not a secret that we have vendors who are graduates on our streets, right? And people who've gone to university and gotten a degree, I suspect, aspire to achieve more in life than being a vendor, right? So we have a problem here in terms of the universe of opportunities we have created for young people who are ambitious, who have graduated, and that's why, so in as much as it's a good thing that we have all this hard currency coming into the country from the diaspora, I think that it speaks to challenges that we have domestically in terms of the level of opportunity that we are not creating for all of these people who could be building businesses and creating wealth right here at home.
I think that's something I actually agree with.
And I think I agree as well. What actually concerns me, it concerns me that we've had to export kids for us to survive. What concerns me a little bit more is the dismal pass rates we're getting in the educational system. So the next generation of kids, are they're not going to be fit to develop this economy because they've been poorly educated, and they're not going to be suitable to export.
It speaks again to the Auditor General's. That's why I was saying it's very important, the Auditor's report, to look at it from a strategic perspective, because our best export turns out to be
our kids,
human capital. And I would say, because remember, remittances are unencumbered. What it means is a dollar that comes in here, we did not spend, well, we spent in terms of educating, but in terms of earning that dollar, Zimbabwe did not spend a single thing. And there's no cost to that dollar. So when you look at platinum, there's a cost to that export.
Diesel, electricity, spares, machines.
So what's unencumbered? You're the accountant. How much would it be? So for every dollar platinum we export in platinum, how much is unencumbered?
Well, a number that's been thrown around is that most exports cost 93%.
So 7 cents.
In
so the dollar that we have from remittances comes here. Now the problem with our system, where we are not acknowledging the diaspora and remittances, is that our policies, our monetary policies, especially in the formal sector, are not confident boosting, are not robust enough to keep that dollar within Zimbabwe. So what's happening is, a lot of people are taking their savings outside, right, outside of our borders. So you have remittances that are coming in, but people are taking their savings outside.
Okay,
So it's not really helping us. So our remittances help as far as consumption is concerned, but as far as confidence boosting in the financial services and as far as investment is concerned, we do not have that.
I like what you're saying, and I think if you could put on your hat as a banker and say, look, as a country, we're getting about $1 billion a year from the diaspora,
1.2,
right?
he said.
1.2. Call it, but let's be conservative. And just call it $1 billion. Let's forget about what's happening in the informal sector, right?
If 1.2 is the formal
okay,
number.
I'll call it 1.2. Yeah. If you were handed a mandate as a banker and you said, look, if you could securitize $1 billion of money coming in through formal channels, how much money could you raise today?
Well, I have a better way in which you can securitize the currency board. It's actually an acknowledgement that a lot of our remittances are actually coming from South Africa, right? But imagine if the 1.2, every time you send 1.2 billion, it stays in Zimbabwe. Now, after 10 years, what do you have?
No, okay,
Right?
you're answering your own question here. I asked you a simple...
He does that. I thought he only did that to me.
No, I've answered.
That's like his answer. Tinashe's answer to every question is the currency board.
No, I want you to answer... Okay, I'll ask George this question.
Yes.
Right. So you've got a nation that gets 1.2 billion a year in diaspora receipts, right? And if you were appointed a banker to the government, right, and you had a mandate to raise money on global capital markets, and you could demonstrate that there's 1.2 billion that comes in every year, how much money do you think you could raise?
I reckon I'd raise 1.2 times the average life expectancy of the parents of the kids in the diaspora. Why?
That's not a number. Oh my gosh.
No. And I'm answering your question because I would multiply it by about 10 or 15. But I'll explain to you how a banker would look at this. A banker would look at this and say, every person in the diaspora who's sending money home is probably looking after their parents. Or work out what percentage is looking after their parents. And nobody's ever going to let their parents starve to death. So I can actually mortgage the inflows that are coming to look after parents in this country until those parents die. So if the average person so if the average person in the diaspora has parents, let's say in their 70s, and we think they'll live until 80, I would take that 1.2 billion and multiply it by 10, and I'd lend you, because that money will keep coming.
Can you answer this question? The money is coming in, but it's also going out. So why would you lend when you know that the money is not staying in the country? That's our biggest problem.
No, I'd capture it when it's coming in. You should look at how Afrixim does it. They're really clever.
Yeah, they use gold.
Yes, when it's coming in.
Yeah, but then our gold production is
but
way lower than our remittances.
Tinashe,
Principle's the same.
So,
no,
just
Tinashe.
explain that only 7 cents stays in
With
the
the gold.
country.
Let's assume you're absolutely right. Let's assume you're absolutely right. And that of every dollar of that 1.2 billion leaves the country. Okay?
Yeah.
Right? When George, as the government's banker, successfully raises 12 billion for the government to build roads and do whatever they feel makes the most sense, it's also going to leave the country. And that's okay. I don't see how that's a problem.
That's why you need a currency board, because when you have a currency board...
We're not talking about a currency board. We're not talking about a currency board. We're not talking about a currency board. Okay, another issue in the news. We're not discussing the currency board.
We're not talking about a currency board.
Another issue in the news. This week, the currency auction is 1 year. Look, we're running out of time, so no lectures. Verdict. Good, bad, neutral.
Terrible idea.
Ravar?
Look, I think they should just let it be an auction. Like, literally...
So you also think it's been bad?
It hasn't been an auction. It's been a... It hasn't been an auction.
I mean, imagine the exporters who lost $1.4 billion. What could they have done with that $1.4 billion?
Have they lost it?
Yes, they did. Because they were supposed, they had the full claim on that $1.4 billion. And they were supposed to decide what they wanted to do.
They still
with that
can.
$1.4
They still can.
million. No, they were given Zoom dollars.
40%, yes. But
Yeah,
but it's still their money.
What
They can
can
buy it
they
back.
do with those Zoom dollars?
They can come back to auction and buy it back if they need it.
No, they cannot.
They can.
No, they cannot.
If they have no foreign currency on their nostro, they can come to auction.
No, not when you're an exporter.
Yes, even if you're an exporter. If you have you filled in an auction form?
Guys,
So you're telling
this
me-
is a rabbit hole. I thought you were opening up.
Okay, thank you. This stuff is good.
No, it is. It's actually, I forgot to mention
So
when you
it's
asked me
okay.
about it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, whatever.
I am a good barrister. I forgot to mention that.
But not on Friday evening.
Even on a Friday evening, I am a coffee junkie and snob, and proud of it.
Okay, anyway, you forgot to mention that.
It's also non-chill filtered. So I don't know whether you know this,
No, I
but
don't.
I'll explain it to the audience. So basically what they do, the reason why when you pour whiskey into a glass with ice, it's still very clear, is because they put the whiskey through a process called chill filtering, where they reduce its temperature by a significant amount, and a lot of the proteins in that whiskey coagulate, and they fail to make it through that filter. So when you put ice in your whiskey, it's clear. But a lot of the interesting flavors in the whiskey are in those proteins. So the guys who are really serious about their customers capturing all the flavors, they don't chill filter their whiskey. So this particular bottle is non-chill filtered, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing what's coming out of the new world, eh? I mean, we see a revolution in our time. A generation before, this was happening in wine, where everybody thought wine came from Europe, and all of a sudden it was coming from Argentina, Australia, and other places. And here we are, drinking whiskey from Asia. And, care to dream a bit. Why can't we be making stuff like this in Zim? This is made from barley, I believe.
Absolutely. And we make a lot of barley. That's what your Castle, Zambezi, Bollinger's, Pilsner is made of.
All the difference between this and Castle really is time, isn't it?
Yeah, they distill it and put it in a barrel, and they sit and wait.
Let's
You don't have the patience.
He's a pessimist.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we depress you, maybe we inspire you. But I think we should be inspired. I know sometimes it seems gloomy, sometimes it's a bit confusing. But in the words of Alexia Kawara, mhepo inovhuvhuta ndo mugariro wayo. Denga rinokwidibira roda kunaisa mvura. Mwedzi unotombonyura wani. Usiku kochinya kusviba. Azoona mabvazuva. Chiedza chotouya. Zuva parinobuda richishaina. Newe shainawo. It's been lovely having you along. It's another weekend has come. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe. COVID is real. If you can't be good at it.
Cheers to that, buddy.
Okay.